Welcome to Modern Home Masterminds with Bespoke Brokers. I'm Shauna Glazier, designated broker and owner.
And I'm Brittany Williamson, associate broker with Bespoke Real Estate. We are Bespoke Real Estate, and we're also your guides to modern luxury across the entire state of Arizona.
Each week, we chat with masterminds shaping the modern spaces. Do you want to intimately get to know your architect, builder, or design team? Open communication and relationships will get you the dream home you've always wanted.
From architects to builders, designers, and more, let's explore the art of modern living together.
All right. Welcome back, listeners. Do you want to know what award-winning modern interior design and world championship log rolling have in common? The answer is Katie Taratsas.
Yes, Katie is the owner of Katie Bowe Design, which is a boutique residential and commercial interior design company headquartered right here in Phoenix, Arizona. But she's also a world champion log roller.
Yes. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you so much for having me, you guys.
Katie, our listeners want to learn more about modern interior design from you. But first, can you tell us about this log rolling thing? What is it?
I know, right? It's a little unusual.
I Googled it, so I know what it is, but this is crazy. How did you get into it?
So I grew up in Wisconsin, and my mother is from northern Wisconsin, and she was one of 6 children, and she had a single mom. And in that town, there was a really instrumental guy who loved history, and he started the Lumberjack World Championships in this small town in northern Wisconsin. My mom was best friends with his daughter. And so they got into it at a young age. And my mom was a 7-time world champion log roller. She just really took to it quite well. And she was on ABC Superstars back in the day, in the 60s and 70s. And Wide World of Sports came to this small town in Wisconsin. And so when I was growing up, we did that as soon as we could walk. Run, we were log rolling. And so I competed professionally in log amateur, and then became a teenager, and I entered the pro division. And at that time, it was kind of cool. The ESPN Great Outdoor Games was essentially the answer to ESPN X Games. So the Great Outdoor Games was chopping, sawing, log rolling, dog agility trials, just kind of more of the hunting, fishing. I think they had a bass competition. And so we were competing in the summers in college, and really started to get into log rolling professionally. So
I want to know, because I did some Googling as well, I want to know how you get on the log.
Well, so there's 2 ways. So when you're competing, you are competing off of a dock. And so generally speaking, the water depth is anywhere from 4 to 6 feet. So it could be, chest high or over your head. And so you get on off the dock, and they have they have poles essentially, and they pull you out away from the dock so that you can fall either way. And they wait for it to be steady, and then they call time in, and that's when the match starts. But practicing, it's just on a beach. We're in knee-deep water, and we step on the log.
So is there somebody on the log with you?
Yes.
And is there ever a match where it's just you're on your log and someone else is on your log, and how long you stay on?
No. So it's always whoever can stay on the longest. It's kind of like a sparring match without actually touching the other person. So there's a center line, and as the match goes on in time, to speed it up, you actually go down in size on diameter of the logs. So the logs get faster and they float you less. And so it's the number of falls. So the best out of 5 falls wins the match. And so you go on, and you really use your footwork, and you're always reading the other person's feet to see where they are on the log, and you can kick the log. You can kick water in their eyes so they close their eyes.
I don't have time for this, but I just really want to try it now.
It's pretty cool.
So you have a pool in your backyard?
Yes. And with a log,
cool.
yes.
And your family has a log practice device?
Yes. So they started manufacturing a synthetic log rolling log called Key Log, which back in the day when it's a sport that's derived from our logging history in America, and they would put the logs on. They would cut logs in the winter, and they would use horses to drag them to the stream. And then in the spring, when everything melts, all of these logs float downriver to the sawmill. That's how they got them down. And so there were these guys who their job was, a river twists and turns, their job was to keep all of these logs moving down the river. And so they were called the river pigs. So they ran across the logs and kept them moving. And so when the sawmills, when they wanted to compete with one another, their best burlers would compete against each other. And that's where the sport of log rolling came from.
That is so interesting.
So
it's no idea.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I literally could talk about this all day long.
Should we talk about interior design?
I think we should talk about that.
I think it's probably about
because our podcast is about modern design. I know, right? It's so interesting though. So on that, let's switch gears if you don't mind, and we'll talk about some modern interior design.
Of course.
Because we know that you're also very good at that. Maybe a world champion. We don't know yet.
Yeah, right. If there was a competition.
Exactly. If there was a competition, you might win it.
Yes.
We've seen your work and it is amazing. Can you walk us through kind of your process when you meet with a client?
You bet. So when we first start meeting with a client, you really just start to get a feel for what is their timeline? Who do they have on the team? Like, what are just kind of like the nitty gritty of what this project entails? We immediately start talking about that. But as far as design is concerned, it's difficult for people to say what it is that they want. They can give you a few photographs. But really, when we first start to talk with them, we try to talk emotionally about what they want. Like, how do they want to feel in each of their spaces? And we first start with that. Then we go on to programming. And programming is, we have 4 kids, we need 5 bedrooms, a guest room, like what the home really needs. And sometimes that has been established with the architect prior to us coming along. And then we go through each room and just really establish what is the function of each room, how do they want to feel, what are their kind of non-negotiables in design. And that's like really our strong information gathering session when we first meet with them. We don't really present anything in that first meeting. It's really just getting a feel. It's a personal relationship, and it can last 2 to 4 years, depending on the scale of the project. And so that first meeting is really just kind of getting down to the nitty gritty, understanding how they want to feel in the space, having emotional connection. And then our next meeting is when we present the conceptual direction for the project. So, yeah.
That's great. And what role does collaboration with the architects and builder play in your design process?
It's huge.
I'm sure.
I would say to a perspective, like the home builder, like the client, that assembling the right team is just as important as each of the players, and how they work together is going to give you the best home that you can get. And so having an architect who collaborates well with the interior designer, having an interior designer who is technically sound, who understands the drawings that they're receiving from the architect, who can speak to the builder, who is then involved from the get-go, so they can say, this is the budget that we've established, and we love these ideas, but it's out of budget. Right. Because it's difficult. The architect and the interior designer, we can collaborate all we want, but eventually it needs to be built. And so having a strong builder who understands drawings, who has particular details for how they weep water out of a beautiful nano wall, like a window that windows that recede into the wall. They look beautiful, but the builder has to build it, and they have to have beautiful, great trades. They understand the details. Like that's all part of the process. So I think the team is really important, and collaborating is
It's got to be frustrating with you when you don't have that team, right? Because you have this beautiful vision of what it's going to finish.
Yeah.
And I think, one of the projects that we did with you, where it was great watching you work with the really well-known architect builder, and you were the interior designer, just watching that whole process come together. It was special to see you guys collaborate.
Yeah. I think that it's an interesting process, right? So you have the piece of land, and then generally speaking, the architect is one of the first consultants to be hired, because they're responsible for the siting of the home. They're responsible for the volume, the architecture of this space, the shell, really. And sometimes the interior designers are brought on a little bit afterwards. And so we're kind of brought on a little bit mid-process sometimes. And so that collaboration is really appropriate and really needed. And then how those details get communicated. There's 2 different sets of drawings, and how that gets communicated to the builder, both in drawing sets, but also how that's communicated on site. A lot of what we do is what we call construction administration. So we've got our beautiful drawings, we've got our beautiful mood boards. A lot of people can do that. But how do you problem solve? How do you make sure that your design intent is actually being built is a lot of what we do. So
being on site, being present.
Yep. So we have a variety of walks that we do during the construction period. So we do our framing walk. So as the building is being framed up, we do, and prior to what they call rough-ins. So you frame a house, you pour the slab, you frame the house, and then you have your electrical and plumbing. So that's where they're drilling holes through your studs, they're running all of your wire, your plumbing, like they're locating where your faucets are, where your drains are. You know, they're really everything that goes behind the wall. So we walk prior to them coming in. So it's called a framing walk. So we make sure that the framing, all the volumes feel right. And that walk is with the builder, the architect, the interior designer. And we make sure that what is on the drawings is actually what was built, you know, because that sometimes people get ideas in the field and just decide to do things. You know, that happens. And sometimes it's a great decision. And then other times it's like, this was not our intent. We need to fix this. And then after the plumber and the electrician do their rough-in, we then walk. So we make sure that if you have a faucet that's coming out of the wall mount faucet, that location is appropriate, that, you know, that your light switches are all in the right location, that your recessed fixtures, that they coincide appropriately with your decorative fixtures. There are all these kind of things that occur behind the wall that you can change it prior to putting drywall on your wall. So there are all these kind of like moments in construction where you let the trades do their work, and then you come in and you do a nice quick check, you run through any issues. And so those walks are really important. So we do framing, rough-in, we do a tile walk, you know, all the tiles it's a big budget item, you know? And so we sit with the tile installer and we make sure that all of the details are correct. We do what we call a dry lay. So they lay out what the pattern will be, and we're all in agreement that this is the way we want it installed. Sometimes there's a missing piece here or there. And so it's really important that all that gets worked out before they start installing the tile.
Yeah, this is interesting. I didn't realize how much involvement an interior designer had pre and post rough-in. Like, I didn't realize that you're the one making sure the lights are hung, you know, the outlets are where they're at. So it's really interesting.
It's actually sometimes, it depends on the architect, but oftentimes I see the architect far less on the site than the designer and the builder. It's almost like they have created the shell, and we'll see them more often like in framing, but pretty much after that, a lot of those walks and that kind of detailing gets handed off to the interior designer.
Yeah, because you're planning on kind of functionality of the space, correct? So if we've got a coffee bar, we need to make sure that we have outlets in the correct spaces, things like that.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So what are the trends that you're seeing most right now?
I would say a big trend, especially in modern design, is a kind of softer contemporary, where clients are really wanting this comforting feeling. They still want the clean lines of modern design, and they still want the beautiful volumes and kind of the open views and connection to nature that modern design affords you. But the materiality has gotten much more organic and almost has gone back in time a bit. Like we're seeing a lot of plaster detailing, which is kind of an older construction technique, right? And we're seeing a lot of kind of rougher woods with steel juxtaposed with steel and iron. You know, like there's a lot, I feel like that there's a need to create texture and comfort in modern design. Sometimes I feel like design is a pendulum, so it swings really far one way, and then we just kind of have to do a little course correction. And I feel a little bit that modern design, we're in the course correction right now in this softer contemporary feel for interiors.
Yeah, we're feeling that.
Yeah, not so sterile.
Yes.
I feel like there for a while it was feeling very sterile, and that's something that we heard from our clients as well. And what we're hearing, I don't want it to feel sterile.
Yeah,
No.
you just want it more moody, more relaxing.
I keep hearing this word cosseted lately, and I think that people are we're spending so much time at home, right? And they are places of refuge and comfort, and we as humans, we're only, anywhere from 5 foot to 6 foot. And we've created these really large volumes. Building techniques have allowed us to create these huge volumes that we're living in. And there's a desire to feel comfortable. And that comes because we're not going to create smaller spaces. That comes with materiality and making materials that are textured and feel innate to kind of the human experience and a little more natural.
Yeah. No, I so relate to that. And, what we're seeing is the trend also of the spaces being smaller. The houses are staying the same size, but you're making separate rooms coming back. People are wanting the separate dining and the separate living.
Yes.
And separate little areas, even like sunken living rooms I'm seeing are
coming. Oh my gosh, I so want one.
Yeah,
I want a sunken living room with like an in-room planter with like, you know what I mean? I think all of my desires for Bali living are coming out these days.
Yeah, but as a real estate broker, I'd be like, please don't do the sunken living room. Please don't do it.
I can't tell you how many I've filled in too, right?
Or if you design it, I would just beg the designer to make it to where it can be filled in where you don't have to replace the doors or the windows. Because that's what we want to do. If it's just filling in a sunken living room, it's no big deal. But if it's designed in a space where it's affecting the glass and the doors, it's a giant remodel for the next client.
That, and so that it doesn't affect the rest of the living space, that you could live in the home without having to access that space necessarily.
Right. No, exactly.
That way it ages a little bit better.
So next question, where do you draw your inspiration from when designing modern homes? Like any favorite designers, eras, or travel destinations?
Oh gosh, travel is so huge for me.
Speaking of, I was just at the Iconic Design Awards, and Katie won an award, and she wasn't there. And I texted her right away. I was like, "Where are you? Not on stage?" She's like, "I'm traveling," and she's like, "Yeah, you go out of town and you win an award, and it's the same for us. You go out of town and you get like an offer on a listing." But
it's great.
Yeah,
it's like
tell us about that award, and then tell us about traveling.
Actually, that was a really cool project. So that was like one of those homes that, you go in and we tore that thing down to the studs. Like everything got ripped out. It had had some great bones, and it was like that 90s Tuscan, which Phoenix was particularly hit hard with. Yes. I think there's still some vestiges left in the neighborhoods, but it was for a young modern family. They had 4 children and they got pregnant with their 5th during the process. But the client, she really wanted just like clean it up without, and almost enhance the architectural heritage of Tuscan is the wrong word. We called it clean Santa Barbara. So we went with the arches, but all the details got cleaned up. All of the ornate iron got pulled out. We really worked with the bones really well. We knocked some walls out. We opened up. They looked towards Camelback Mountain, which is beautiful. And they had no windows facing Camelback. Like there were just all of these things that we had so much fun designing that property. We did a lot of plaster and we kind of pulled out all of the ornate beaming. It was just like, it was a really fun project to see what we could do with an existing structure.
Yeah,
so it was really quite fun.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was really beautiful. Yeah. And it had that very cozy element to it,
Yeah.
So
sorry I sidetracked us. So travel, anything that you pull inspiration from, different eras or
everything, right?
Designers, yeah.
So I was as verbose as I am for an adult, I was a very shy child, and I absolutely loved books. And so like I get a lot of my references from literature. I love to read about interiors and the way it makes people feel. I was like completely obsessed with like period literature and historical fiction, which is kind of sounds like the opposite of what modern design is. But I'm not a person who thinks that like there's one original idea. I think that we continue to evolve as our ideas evolve, as families, society evolve, like we continue to do that. And so much of modern design, the proportion and the scale, a lot of it is derived from history, right? And traditional and classical design. And so I really like to reference that. And so that when you're looking at furniture and when you're looking at your interiors, that it feels just kind of innate. You don't know why it feels right, but it feels right because it's derived from the golden mean, the rule of three, like all of these things that exist in nature, have made their way into classical design and then make their way into modern design.
It's very like organic approach to it.
Yeah. And you know what? Sometimes design is just, it's subjective, right? Like,
just fun. Sometimes it's just fun.
You find the joy in it.
Yeah.
I know that there's a lot of money involved, and you really have to take the responsibility seriously that your clients give you, but it should be a joyful process too for the clients. And so there's references to be found everywhere, but travel is probably numero uno.
Yeah.
And I can imagine each client kind of comes with their reference point too.
Totally.
They went to Morocco and that they really like that vibe, that sort of thing. And they kind of bring that to you.
Yeah. And that's what like that first meeting is about too, is like, how do you want to feel? Like, what are your references? Like, what are you guys bringing to the project? Because for me, I view myself as like almost like a mirror, a foil to like what their desires are. And almost like, this sounds very woo, but like they're kind of spiritual interiors guide. I won't let you guys walk off a cliff, but like we're going to make this interior a reflection of who you are as a family, and not only where you are, but like where you want to be in the future as well.
So how do you help your clients pick finishes and furniture and things like that do fit, what we were just talking about and kind of those references, but are also functional?
So thankfully, that when we do the concepting, we do what we call like a vibe check. And in the vibe check, we give them like a material palette. So this is the way you guys told us. This is how you want it to feel. This is where your location is. Like, so some of this stuff is very locationally dependent too. Like, what is the architecture? Like, what neighborhood are you in? Like, how does this feel like it is innate to this place, right? So we do that initial palette is very much a reflection of what they immediately said they wanted to feel, right? And so when we create those finishes, that just becomes like our touchstone moving forward. Then we do a furniture plan, and that furniture plan is very functional, right? Like, we're a family of 3, and my son always likes to get the corner of the sectional, or we're not a family that hangs out on the sectional. We entertain a lot. So like, all of that function goes. And I think that clients, they really desire function as well. Like, and my job is for them to give me the function that they need and for us to make it look beautiful. And so there's really not that much tension in the finish and the function. There's so much amazing furniture out there. There's so many amazing artisans and makers that can make a piece that is functional and also looks fabulous. So I find it kind of like a fun interplay.
It's horrifying to me. I hate it. I love that there are designers that actually love it, because I look at a room and I have no idea how to make it functional sometimes. So it's amazing watching people do their magic like you do it in homes. What about budgeting? How do you help your clients budget for a project?
Budget is so tough. It is so tough. And there's such a wide range, but we've done enough at this point that we look at the value of the real estate, the value of the home. And I would say that when we start just like rough budgeting, we say you're going to spend anywhere from like 15 to 20% on the furnishings of the value of your home, right? So I think that's like a pretty good marker for people when they're purchasing a $5 million home. They know that they're going to spend anywhere from $500 to $1 million in furnishings. That's just kind of like a good marker. And then after we talk about that and we establish the furniture plan, then we create a line item budget, and that budget has a low and a high, and so sometimes we'll find something at CB2 that works great, right? And then other times it's like, ooh, this Fortuny fabric, which Fortuny is like a very fancy Italian line. Like this, we've got to do this, right? Like there's some horse trading involved in budgeting. So
for sure.
Yeah.
And I wonder, this is kind of not one of our questions, but just so our listeners understand maybe the different levels of interior design. You can be involved from the very beginning with the architect and picking out lighting and tile and all of that. And then is there another service that you're not involved on that part, but it is just a furniture package? Like what different
Exactly.
services do you?
So we provide services in what we call 2 phases. And so the first phase is what we kind of initially think of in what we like design services. And so those design services are the plan set, right? So the architect gives you what we call the base plan. So they give you the shell, and the interior designers, then we design all of the cabinetry. We pick out the hardware. We do all of your countertops. We help you shop for appliances. We do all of the plumbing, all of the lighting, every little baseboard, millwork detail. That's all in our scope. And we have a strong interior design drawing set that is then used on site by the construction team to both bid the project and also build the project. And so that's one phase of work. And that's what we were kind of talking about earlier. We have strong construction administration. And so that's getting everything to the point where your furnishings are ready to come in and you're ready to do the, forgive the HGTV, but like the move that bus kind of moment, right? And then we have a furnishing scope. And so primarily we do, ideally, when you're doing ground up, you're doing both scopes. Sometimes we're brought in, they buy a spec home and we just do the furnishings, right? And so that the furnishings process is similar in the first meeting, how you want to feel, what's the function, all of that. And our material palette's a little bit different, right? The initial material palette is your countertops, your cabinetry, your flooring,
and that's already all there.
Yeah. And that's in the design scope. That's phase 1. And then your material palette for phase 2 for furnishings is all of your fabrics, your cocktail tables, a little bit of the marble that you're going to use. That's all the second phase. So the second phase, we generally like to start after we've completed all of the design documentation and construction is well underway. Then we start the furnishings scope. And so we have already established what the furniture plans are going to be. And we start establishing what each of those pieces will be. So we work, generally speaking, we try to accomplish that furnishing scope. It's a lot, right? So you have some really large homes that we're working with. And so we tackle in a meeting with someone anywhere from 750 to 1,000 square feet at each meeting, right?
Wow.
Because you can only, it's difficult to just absorb those decisions, right? We give them an overall view, our inspiration picks in the first meeting, they sign off on it, and then we start tackling the individual spaces.
Do you typically do it like the primary space in one meeting and then living room? I could imagine there are some spaces that require a little bit more than other.
Yep, exactly. So generally speaking, we'll start with, oftentimes the way people are living is that we have a great room that has, the kitchen, maybe an adjacent library or dining. So we'll do those spaces together. And then maybe we do a few of the secondary bedrooms together. We do their offices together, their primary suite, and any of the kind of auxiliary spaces, whether that be a fitness room or the library or the kids room or the casita, those all are separate meetings as well. So that process can take, designing that can take anywhere from 4 to 6 months.
What about if somebody's going in for just a remodel and would you go into a project like that didn't need a 100% package, but they wanted to completely remodel?
Yeah, we must have. And the interesting thing is remodels are somewhat more work than ground up construction is.
For sure.
So the drawing set is actually very similar for what we do for remodels versus new construction. And our services are fairly similar as well. For new build, for our design documentation, we can do a flat fee for that. Whereas remodel, we just have no idea what we're getting into. So that's billed monthly on an hourly rate.
That's kind of like the project you just won the award on.
Yes,
I could imagine it's one thing to have plans from a builder and you start from the beginning. And it's another to have the shell.
Totally.
Tuscan. And what do we do with it?
And you pull, you pull things away and you're like, oh, I didn't think that was structural. No, that's structural. We got to keep that. There's a lot of pivoting, problem solving that occurs in a remodel that doesn't necessarily occur in new construction.
Yeah.
So.
Well, this has been excellent.
Yes.
It really has. It is time to wrap up. In closing, we like to play a little game called Rapid Fire. We just ask you a couple questions. So they're meant to be answered in one sentence or one word. Just something fun.
Impossible for me.
We can try. Well, and this actually, the first one leads right into what we're just talking about. All right, you ready?
Yes.
Brand new, build, or remodel?
Brand new.
Yeah.
Mountains or ocean?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I moved here from Hawaii, so I know. But I think it's mountains.
Both.
I know, right? We're both there, right?
Well, you could log roll in lakes and the ocean.
Yes, I could. Yes. Ocean's actually difficult to log roll in.
Oh, I bet, right?
Yeah, you need a still body.
Coffee or happy hour?
Coffee.
Okay.
This one I stole directly from you. Cream say it for me. Bouquet. In or out?
Still in.
Okay.
It's still in.
We're seeing it everywhere.
Yeah. Texture it's giving us those feels that we were talking about earlier.
It's not good for cat owners, though.
No. Oh my gosh.
Think
We have a
scratch
client
pull.
now that we send them home with the fabrics and they rub them on their dogs and see if they leave them out to see if their nails kind of pull at the texture. So.
I always touch it when I go in places and then I think, oh, there would be dog hair all over this.
Yeah.
What is the biggest lesson one can learn from log rolling?
Get back up again. When you fall in, you're in the water. Mm-hmm. So when I went to college, I wrote an essay called at the time it was Everything I Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten was a big book at the time. So I did everything I need to know I learned from log rolling. And one of them ones was just there's humility, right? Everyone fails, and when you fall in, you're in the water, and there's nothing more humiliating than falling in the water and you're looking up at your opponent and you're soaked and they're just dry. So I just think it's get back up again. We're all doing our best, approach life with some humility.
I love that.
That's awesome.
Yeah. That is awesome.
Thank you so much for coming on with us. We are going to link all of your contact information in our show notes, but if you want, will you tell our listeners where they can find you?
You bet. You can find me at www.Katie Bowe Design. So it's Bowe. So Bowe is my middle name. Everyone gets a little confused. Yeah. So it's Katie Bowe Design. And you can find us on Instagram as well. We're Katie Bowe Design. That's our Instagram handle. So check out our work, come and see what we're doing. Interact. It'll be fun.
Yeah. And we recommend it. We love her work as well.
Yes, definitely.
All right, that's it for today's episode of Modern Home Mastermind. If you've enjoyed our show, please subscribe, and leave us a review.
And thanks to our guest for all of her insights. And to you, our listeners, thanks for learning about everything modern with us.
Thank you guys for having me. This was lovely.
If you're ready to take your next step in your real estate journey, you can find us at Bespoke Real Estate. And until next time, keep living, loving everything modern.